The coffee mug slipped from my hands at 6:47 a.m., shattering against the kitchen floor in a symphony of ceramic shards and hot liquid. I stood there in my faded pajamas, watching steam rise from the puddle like incense from a broken altar, and wondered if this was what my life had become. Everything I touched turning to fragments. "Mom, are you okay?" 8-year-old Emma's voice drifted from the staircase, tinged with that careful concern children develop when they've witnessed too many mornings like this one. "Just clumsy, sweetheart," I called back, my voice artificially bright. "Go get ready for school." But I wasn't clumsy. I was 32 years old, a woman who had once managed a household of 5 with military precision, and now I couldn't hold a simple coffee cup without my hands trembling from the weight of unspoken resentment. The mess on the floor reflected the chaos in my chest. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days since David's affair came to light. I'd counted. I'd forgiven him, said the words, meant them in the moment, even renewed our vows in a small ceremony that felt more like a funeral than a celebration. But forgiveness, I was learning, was apparently different from forgetting. And I was drowning in memories I couldn't wash away. As I knelt to collect the larger pieces, a shard caught my thumb, drawing a thin line of blood. The physical pain was almost a relief, something concrete I could name, unlike the churning mass of emotions that had taken residence in my ribcage. Betrayal, anger, disappointment, and underneath it all, a self-doubt that whispered maybe I hadn't been enough. Maybe I'd driven him to her arms with my quiet ways, my contentment with small things, my inability to be the vibrant, exciting woman he'd apparently needed. The worst part wasn't even David's betrayal anymore. It was how I'd become a stranger to myself. The woman who used to find joy in Emma's laughter, who baked cookies just because Tuesday felt like a cookie day, who believed in second chances and the power of love to heal anything. Where had she gone? In her place stood this hollow version of me, going through the motions of motherhood and marriage like an actress who'd forgotten her lines. David appeared in the doorway, already dressed for his commute to the insurance office. Another rough morning. His tone carried that careful neutrality we'd perfected, the voice you use with fragile things that might break if handled too roughly. I looked up from the floor, still clutching bloody ceramic. Just tired. It was easier than explaining that I'd woken at 3 a.m. again, replaying the phone call when I'd heard her voice on his voicemail. That phantom pain had a schedule all its own, showing up uninvited during grocery shopping, school plays, and quiet moments when I should have felt grateful for our restored family. He moved to help, and I flinched instinctively when his fingers brushed mine, reaching for the same piece. We both pretended not to notice. "Megan," he said softly, using the voice he reserved for apologies and difficult conversations. "Maybe you should talk to someone. Like, professionally." The suggestion hung between us like morning fog. I wanted to snap that he was the one who'd broken our marriage, not me. That I was the one trying to hold everything together while he got to play the reformed husband. But Emma's feet were pattering overhead, and we'd made a pact never to fight in front of her again. "I'm fine," I whispered, but the words tasted like ash. After they left, David to his office, Emma to second grade, I sat in the kitchen surrounded by the scent of bleach and the ghosts of what we used to be. The house felt too quiet, too full of corners where memories lurked. In the living room, our wedding photo still smiled from the mantel, but I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked at it without feeling nauseous. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sarah. "Coffee later? You've been too quiet lately." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you explain to someone that you're drowning in plain sight? That forgiveness was supposed to be this beautiful, healing thing, but instead it felt like swallowing poison and hoping the other person would die. "Can't today. How's stuff?" I typed back, then immediately deleted it. "Having a hard morning." Delete. "I think I'm broken." Delete. Finally, rain check. XO. But as I hit send, I realized something that made my chest tighten with panic. I wasn't just having trouble forgiving David. I was having trouble forgiving myself. For not staying strong enough. For the 1,000 small compromises that had brought us here. For the woman I'd become who jumped at her own shadow and couldn't hold a coffee cup steady. The question that had been haunting me for months crystallized into something sharp and undeniable. What if forgiveness wasn't enough? What if some things were simply too broken to be fixed, including me? Outside, the first snow of November began to fall, each flake disappearing the moment it touched the warm earth. I watched from my kitchen window and wondered if that's what my attempts at healing looked like, beautiful gestures that melted away the instant they met reality. I was supposed to be the soft-spoken wife, the gentle mother, the woman who believed love conquered all. But standing there in my broken kitchen, I felt more like a fraud than a survivor. And the scariest part wasn't that I might never heal from what David had done to us. The scariest part was that I wasn't sure I remembered who I'd been before it all fell apart, or if that woman was worth finding again. 3 weeks after the coffee mug incident, I found myself sitting in my car outside Dr. Mitchell's office, engine running, heat blasting against the December cold. I'd made the appointment in a moment of desperation after snapping at Emma for something as innocent as asking for help with her math homework. The look on her face, confusion mixed with hurt, had been my breaking point. But now, staring at the brick building with its cheerful red door and snow-dusted evergreens, I felt like a fraud preparing to waste a stranger's time. What was I supposed to say? That I'd forgiven my husband but still felt like I was drowning? That I was supposed to be grateful for our reconciliation, but instead felt like I was suffocating? My phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just checking in. How are you feeling about today?" I wanted to tell him I felt like running. That the thought of talking about our marriage, about her, about the person I'd become in the aftermath, made me want to drive straight to the airport and disappear. Instead, I said, nervous, "It's going to help, Meg. You'll see." The confidence in his voice irritated me. He got to be optimistic about my healing while I did the actual work of it. "I should go. Don't want to be late." "I love you," he said, and I could hear him waiting for me to say it back. "Talk tonight," I replied, and hung up before the silence could stretch longer. Dr. Watson's office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of a sterile, intimidating space I'd imagined, it felt like someone's living room. Overstuffed chairs, warm lighting, books scattered on every surface. The man himself was equally disarming. Rumpled cardigan, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a Connecticut accent that somehow made everything sound both intellectual and approachable. "Megan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm glad you're here." "I'm not sure I am," I admitted, then immediately felt foolish for the honesty. He smiled. "That's actually a good sign. In my 20 years doing this work, the people who are sure they want to be here are usually the ones avoiding the real work." I settled into the chair across from him, hyper-aware of every sound, the tick of a wall clock, the hum of a space heater, the distant murmur of traffic. I don't really know where to start. How about with why you're here? The question should have been simple. Instead, it felt like being asked to explain the color blue to someone who'd been blind their whole life. My husband had an affair. 3 years ago. We worked through it, supposedly, but I feel like I'm stuck. Stuck how? I twisted my wedding ring, a nervous habit I developed since reconciliation. Everyone says forgiveness is supposed to be freeing, right? Like, you forgive and then you move on and everything gets better. But I forgave him. I really did. And I still feel angry, sad, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Dr. Watson leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about that forgiveness. What did it look like for you?" The memory came flooding back, David and me in our bedroom, him crying as he promised it would never happen again, me holding him and saying, I forgive you," over and over like a mantra that might become true through repetition. I said the words. I meant them. We went to counseling, renewed our vows. I made the choice to stay and rebuild. My voice cracked. "So why do I still feel like I'm drowning? Can I share something with you that might help?" He reached for a book on the side table, dog-eared and filled with sticky notes. There's research from Harvard Medical School that shows forgiveness isn't a one-time event. Dr. Robert Enright's work demonstrates that forgiveness is actually a process with distinct phases. What you're experiencing, that feeling of being stuck, might just mean you're not done processing yet. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. "You mean I'm not failing at forgiveness?" Far from it. You're doing exactly what healing looks like for most people. Messy, nonlinear, complicated. Over the following weeks, our sessions became my lifeline. Dr. Watson introduced me to concepts I'd never considered. He talked about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, helped me understand that forgiving David didn't mean I had to pretend the affair hadn't changed me fundamentally. But the breakthrough came during our 4th session when he handed me a stack of index cards. "I want you to try something," he said. "Write down every hurt, every betrayal, every loss you experienced, not just from the affair, but everything that came after. The way it changed how you see yourself, how you relate to Emma, how you move through the world." The task felt impossible at first. How do you quantify the moment you stopped believing in your own worth? How do you write down the loss of innocence, the death of security, the way trust had become something foreign and frightening? But I started writing. Card after card after card. The affair itself. Finding her underwear in our laundry. The way he said her name in his sleep. Feeling like I wasn't enough. Emma asking why mommy cries so much. Not being able to enjoy our anniversary. Flinching when he touches me. Feeling guilty for staying. Feeling guilty for being angry. Not recognizing myself in the mirror. By the time I finished, Dr. Watson's office floor was covered with small white rectangles, each one representing a piece of my shattered life. Looking at them all laid out, I understood why I felt so heavy. I've been carrying every single one of these hurts like stones in my pockets. "That's a lot of pain," Dr. Watson said quietly. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "No wonder I feel broken." "But you're not broken, Megan. You're processing. There's a difference." He handed me a stack of red construction paper squares. "Now I want you to go through each card, and I want you to make a choice about forgiveness. Not the big, dramatic kind. The quiet, daily kind. As you read each hurt, say these words: I choose to forgive this pain so it doesn't define my future. What if I don't feel it? Then say, I choose to forgive this pain so it doesn't define my future, and what my heart can't do yet, God's grace will cover." Card by card, I worked through my pain. Some forgivenesses came easily, the small slights, the unintentional hurts. Others felt like trying to lift mountains with my bare hands. But with each red square I placed over each white card, something shifted inside me. I wasn't erasing the pain. I was choosing not to let it write the rest of my story. When I finished, I looked down at a floor covered in red. Not the red of blood or wounds, but the red of redemption, of choice, of a woman deciding that her past wouldn't prison her future. "How do you feel?" Dr. Watson asked. I took inventory of my body, my heart, my spirit. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 years felt lighter. Not gone, but manageable. "Different," I said. "Like maybe I'm not as broken as I thought." "You were never broken, Megan. You were healing. There's a difference." Driving home that day, I realized something profound had shifted. The woman who'd walked into that office carrying stones had walked out carrying hope instead. And for the first time in 3 years, I believe that might be enough to build a new life on. 2 months into my work with Dr. Watson, he said something that stopped me cold. "Megan, I think you're ready to hear about some research that might change how you think about forgiveness entirely." We were sitting in his office on a gray February afternoon, the kind of day where snow threatens but never commits. I'd been telling him about my latest struggle, how forgiving David seemed to come in waves, how some days I felt genuinely peaceful and other days the anger hit me like a truck. "Am I doing something wrong?" I'd asked. "It feels like I keep having to forgive the same thing over and over." That's when he leaned forward with that expression he got when he was about to share something important. "What if I told you that's exactly how forgiveness is supposed to work?" He pulled out a thick folder marked with sticky tabs and university logos. "I've spent 15 years studying trauma and forgiveness at the University of Connecticut, and before that, I did my doctoral work at Stanford with some remarkable researchers. What we've discovered about forgiveness, well, it would probably surprise most people." I settled deeper into my chair, suddenly hungry for whatever he was about to share. There's a researcher at Stanford named Dr. Fred Luskin who's been studying forgiveness for decades. He worked with people who'd experienced everything from infidelity to genocide, and what he found was revolutionary. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a skill. And like any skill, it requires practice. My mind immediately went to the piano lessons I'd taken as a child, how I'd had to practice scales over and over until my fingers found the right keys without thinking. So when I feel like I'm forgiving David the same thing repeatedly, you're not failing, you're practicing. Dr. Luskin's research, with over 1,500 participants, showed that forgiveness is actually a process of retraining your emotional responses. Each time you choose forgiveness over resentment, you're literally rewiring your brain. Something inside my chest loosened. So I'm not broken for struggling with this? Dr. Watson smiled. Quite the opposite. Your struggle is evidence that you're doing the work. There's actually fascinating research from Harvard Medical School that shows forgiveness has measurable effects on both mental and physical health. Dr. Everett Worthington's studies found that people who learn to forgive have lower cortisol levels, better immune function, and significantly reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety. He pulled out another paper, this one filled with graphs and charts. But here's what I find most interesting, and this comes from Dr. Robert Enright's work at the University of Wisconsin. Forgiveness happens in stages. There's the decision to forgive, which is what you made 3 years ago. But then there's the emotional forgiveness, which happens gradually as you process the hurt and choose, again and again, not to let it define you. I thought about all those mornings when I'd woken up angry, all the times I'd felt guilty for not being over it yet. How long does it typically take? That's the beautiful thing. There's no timeline. Some of Enright's participants took 6 months, others took 6 years. What matters isn't the speed of forgiveness, but the commitment to the process. Dr. Watson stood up and moved to his bookshelf, pulling down a well-worn journal. I want to share something personal with you, if that's okay. About 10 years ago, my own marriage went through a crisis. My wife had what she called an emotional affair. Nothing physical, but she developed feelings for someone else and had been sharing intimate details about our relationship with him. My breath caught. I'd had no idea. I was furious, devastated, and as someone who literally studies forgiveness for a living, I felt like the biggest hypocrite in the world when I couldn't just forgive and move on. He sat back down, the journal open in his hands. That's when I realized I'd been thinking about forgiveness all wrong. I'd been treating it like a light switch, something you either turned on or off. But it's more like learning to play an instrument. You don't expect to master Chopin on your first try. What did you do? I applied everything I'd learned from the research, but I did it slowly, patiently, with a lot of grace for my own process. I kept a forgiveness journal, writing down my angry thoughts, and then consciously choosing to release them. I practiced what Dr. Luskin calls benefit finding, looking for ways the crisis might ultimately strengthen us. And I gave myself permission to have bad days without seeing them as failures. I felt tears starting. Did it work? We'll celebrate our 25th anniversary next month. His smile was warm, genuine. But more importantly, I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending something didn't happen. It's about refusing to let someone else's choices determine your emotional future. He handed me a small card with a quote written in his careful handwriting. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been different. I read it twice, feeling something click into place in my understanding. I've been waiting for the past to change. Exactly. You've been waiting for David to somehow undo what he did, for the affair to not have happened, for the trust to be magically restored. But forgiveness is accepting what happened and choosing to build something new instead of trying to resurrect what was. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of revelation settling around us like snow. There's one more thing, Dr. Watson said. Dr. Kristen Neff's research at the University of Texas shows that self-compassion is actually more important for healing than any other factor. Most people struggling with forgiveness are fighting two battles, one with the person who hurt them and one with themselves for not being over it yet. I thought about all the times I'd called myself weak, all the ways I'd criticized my own healing process. I've been so mean to myself. What would you say to Emma if she came to you struggling with something difficult? I'd tell her it's okay to take her time, that healing isn't linear, that I love her no matter what. The words came automatically. Then maybe it's time to give yourself that same grace. As our session ended, Dr. Watson handed me a homework assignment that would change everything. I want you to write a letter to yourself. Not the Megan you think you should be, but the Megan you are right now. The one who's been doing the hard work of healing for 3 years. Tell her what she needs to hear. Walking to my car that day, I felt like I was carrying a new map for territory I'd been lost in for years. The path ahead still looked challenging, but for the first time, I could see where it was leading. And it was leading toward freedom. The letter to myself took me 3 weeks to write. I'd start, then crumple up the paper, then start again. How do you speak kindly to someone you've been at war with for years? But Dr. Watson had been patient, reminding me each session that self-compassion was a skill like any other. It required practice. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in March. Emma was at school, David was at work, and I was sitting in our kitchen with a cup of tea in my laptop. Instead of trying to write the perfect letter, I decided to just write honestly. Dear Megan, I know you're tired. I know you feel like you've been climbing a mountain that has no peak, carrying weight that belongs to other people. I know you wake up some mornings and wonder if you're strong enough to do this for another day. But I want you to know something. You are enough. Not the Megan you were before David's affair, not the Megan you think you should be by now, but exactly the Megan you are in this moment. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. You chose love when hate felt more justified. You're rebuilding a life with materials that feel foreign in your hands, and that takes courage most people will never understand. Be gentle with yourself today. Your healing doesn't need to happen on anyone else's timeline. With love, the woman you're becoming. Writing those words felt like setting down a suitcase I'd been carrying for miles. When I read the letter to Dr. Watson the following week, he smiled in that way that told me I'd turned a corner. How did it feel to write that? He asked. Weird. Like talking to a friend instead of an enemy. And how do you feel about that friend now? I consider the question. Like maybe she deserves kindness too. Good. Because she does. He leaned forward in his chair. Now I want to teach you something practical that you can use when forgiveness feels impossible. It's based on research from Dr. Sonia Lyabomirsky at UC Riverside about what she calls forgiveness protocols. He handed me a worksheet with 5 steps outlined clearly. 1. Acknowledge the hurt without minimizing it. 2. Recognize the choice between resentment and release. 3. Consider the cost of carrying the anger. 4. Choose empathy over judgment when possible. 5. Commit to the decision for your own well-being. The beautiful thing about this approach, Dr. Watson explained, is that it doesn't require you to feel forgiving. It just requires you to act forgiving, trusting that feelings will follow actions. I practiced the protocol first on small hurts, the way David sometimes forgot to put his dishes in the dishwasher, how he'd interrupt me when I was talking. Each time I felt annoyance rising, I'd work through the 5 steps. It felt artificial at first, like following a recipe for a dish I'd never cooked. But gradually, the process became more natural. The real test came on a Saturday in April. David and I were cleaning out the basement when I found a box I'd forgotten existed. Inside were photos from our early marriage, ticket stubs from dates, love letters he'd written during his deployment with the National Guard. At the bottom of the box was a hotel receipt dated 2 years into our marriage, the weekend we'd gone to Vermont for my birthday. Except this receipt was from a hotel in Boston. A hotel I'd never been to. A hotel David had visited with her. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. He'd taken her to places that were supposed to be ours. They'd made memories in hotels while I was home with Emma, believing we were happy. Megan! David's voice seemed to come from very far away. You okay? I held up the receipt with shaking hands. Boston. March 15th. My birthday weekend. His face went white. Meg, You were with her during our anniversary trip? The words came out strangled, raw. No. That was different. I was supposed to be in Hartford for work, but the conference got moved and I made a terrible choice. The familiar rage rose in my chest, but this time I recognized it. This time I had tools. I sat down on the basement floor, still holding the receipt, and worked through Dr. Watson's protocol. Acknowledge the hurt. This discovery was devastating. Finding out there were layers of betrayal I didn't even know about felt like being stabbed all over again. Recognize the choice. I could let this new information poison the progress we'd made, or I could choose to process it without letting it destroy me. Consider the cost. Carrying rage about something that happened years ago would only steal joy from today. It wouldn't change the past. Choose empathy. David's choices had come from his own brokenness, not from a desire to hurt me specifically. Commit to the decision. I would forgive this too, not because he deserved it, but because I deserve to be free. I need some air, I told David and walked outside. I called Dr. Watson's emergency line, something I'd never done before. I found something, I said when he answered. Evidence of another betrayal I didn't know about. Where are you right now? Sitting in my driveway, trying not to drive away and never come back. That's understandable. This kind of discovery can feel like being re-traumatized. But Megan, you have tools now that you didn't have 3 years ago. Can you use them? I worked through the protocol again, this time out loud with Dr. Watson listening. By the time we hung up, I felt centered enough to go back inside. David was still in the basement, surrounded by scattered memories, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I know finding this makes everything harder. I sat down beside him on the concrete floor. It does. But David, I'm going to forgive this too. Not because what you did was okay, but because I refuse to let your past choices steal my future peace. He looked at me like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. How do you do that? How do you keep choosing us when I keep giving you reasons not to? I choose us because I choose me, I said. Because the woman I want to be is someone who doesn't let other people's brokenness break her. That night, we burned the receipt in our fireplace. Not as a grand gesture of forgiveness, but as a simple acknowledgement that some things needed to be released in order for new things to grow. The next morning, I woke up without the familiar weight of anger pressing on my chest. For the first time in 4 years, I felt light. Not perfect, not completely healed, but genuinely hopeful about the life we were building together. I was learning that forgiveness wasn't a destination you arrived at once. It was a daily practice, a muscle you strengthened, a choice you made again and again until it became as natural as breathing. And I was getting stronger. 1 year later, I stood in front of 25 women at our church's retreat center, my hand surprisingly steady as I held the microphone. 6 months earlier, Pastor Jenny had asked if I'd be willing to share my story at the annual women's conference. The theme was Beauty from Ashes, and apparently, my journey with forgiveness qualified as Exhibit A. A year ago, I began. I would have told you that forgiveness was something you did once, like checking a box on your spiritual to-do list. You forgive, you move on. You live happily ever after. The end. Scattered nods and knowing smiles from the audience told me I wasn't alone in that misconception. But forgiveness, I've learned, is more like tending a garden. You don't plant seeds once and then ignore them. You water them daily, pull weeds when they sprout, and trust the process even when you can't see growth happening underground. I shared about the coffee mug, about Dr. Watson's index cards, about finding that hotel receipt and choosing to forgive anyway. I talked about the research that had changed everything. How forgiveness wasn't about feeling forgiving, but about choosing freedom over bitterness, again and again until it became habit. The woman I was 4 years ago believed that forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened. I continued. The woman I am today knows that forgiveness means accepting what happened and refusing to let it write the rest of my story. After my talk, women approached me with their own stories. Sarah, whose teenage daughter had stolen thousands of dollars to fund a drug addiction. Maria, whose mother had been emotionally abusive for decades. Jennifer, whose best friend had an affair with her husband and then moved across the country without a word. Each story was different, but the pain was universal, that feeling of being stuck between the desire to heal and the fear that forgiveness meant excusing inexcusable behavior. I keep trying to forgive my ex-husband, Sarah confided as we shared coffee during the break. But every time I see him at my daughter's soccer games, the anger comes flooding back. I thought about Dr. Watson's words, about the research showing that forgiveness was a skill requiring practice. What if that anger isn't evidence that you haven't forgiven him? I suggested. What if it's just information that there's still some healing to do in that area? Sarah's eyes widened. I never thought about it that way. This had become my new normal, not having all the answers, but having learned enough about the process to help others navigate their own journeys. Dr. Watson had been right when he said healing wasn't just personal, it rippled outward, touching everyone around you. At home, the changes were quieter but no less profound. Emma, now 9, had stopped asking why Mommy cried so much. Instead, she started telling me about her own struggles, friendship drama at school, anxiety about an upcoming piano recital, trusting that I could hold her emotions without being overwhelmed by my own. Mom, she said one evening as I tucked her into bed, Jenny's parents are getting divorced, and she's really sad. Can you talk to her sometime? The request warmed my heart, and broke it simultaneously. My daughter was learning to recognize pain in others and believed her mom was someone who could help. That felt like the biggest victory of all. David and I had settled into a new rhythm that was different from our first marriage, but somehow more honest. We talked about hard things, now instead of dancing around them. We'd learned to fight fairly, to apologize meaningfully, and to celebrate small victories in our rebuilt relationship. The previous month, we'd gone to Vermont for a long weekend, the same place we'd honeymooned 15 years earlier. As we sat by the lake watching the sunset, David had taken my hand. "Do you ever miss the way we used to be?" he asked. Before everything got complicated, I consider the question honestly. The couple we'd been in our 20s had been innocent, trusting, maybe a little naive about how much two people could hurt each other. The couple we were now carried scars, but also wisdom. Sometimes, I admitted, but I think I like who we're becoming better. Even after everything I put you through, especially because of everything we've walked through. The woman I was before couldn't have handled a crisis like this. She would have fallen apart or run away. The woman I am now knows she's strong enough to survive hard things and kind enough to extend grace anyway. That conversation had crystallized something important for me. Forgiveness hadn't returned me to who I was before. It had created someone entirely new, a woman who could hold pain without being destroyed by it, who could extend mercy without sacrificing her own worth, who could love deeply while maintaining healthy boundaries. Dr. Watson and I had gradually decreased our sessions from weekly to monthly to quarterly check-ins. During our most recent appointment, he'd shared research from Dr. Post at Case Western Reserve University showing that people who practice forgiveness don't just heal faster, they become more resilient, more empathetic, and better equipped to handle future challenges. "You've become a different kind of strong," he observed during our last session. "Not the strength that never gets hurt, but the strength that gets hurt and heals anyway." Now, 3 months after the women's retreat, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, the same kitchen where I'd once shattered a coffee mug and my composure along with it. Emma was at school, David was at work, and I was preparing for something I'd never imagined, leading my first forgiveness workshop at the community center. 12 women had signed up, each carrying their own version of the pain I'd once thought was uniquely mine. I'd planned the session carefully, incorporating everything Dr. Watson had taught me about the research, everything I'd learned about the process, everything I wished someone had told me during my darkest days. As I gathered my materials, index cards for the pain exercise, red squares for the forgiveness ritual, printed copies of Dr. Luskin's forgiveness protocols, I marveled at how far I'd traveled from that broken woman who couldn't hold a simple conversation about feelings. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Proud of you today. Go change some lives." I smiled, typing back, "Thanks. Love you too." And I meant it. Not the desperate, clingy love I'd felt in the early days of our reconciliation, but the steady, chosen love of someone who'd learned the difference between feeling loving and acting loving, between being in love and building love intentionally. Driving to the community center, I thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago, the one who believed forgiveness was a feeling you either had or didn't have, who thought healing was supposed to be neat and linear, who carried other people's choices like they were her own mistakes. That woman was gone, but not lost. She'd been transformed into someone who understood that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about remembering differently. Someone who knew that healing wasn't about returning to who you were before, but about becoming who you were always meant to be. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw women walking toward the building, each one carrying invisible weight, each one hoping for something they might not even be able to name. I knew that feeling. I'd been exactly where they were, broken, desperate, convinced that some hurts were too deep to heal. But I also knew something they were about to discover. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or excusing the inexcusable. It was about refusing to let someone else's choices write the ending of your story. Walking toward the building with my materials in hand, I felt David's words echo in my mind. Go change some lives. But the truth was, I wasn't going in there to change anyone. I was going to share what I'd learned about changing myself. One choice, one card, one red square at a time. The woman I'd been 4 years ago couldn't have imagined this moment. She'd been too busy drowning in her own pain to dream of helping others navigate theirs. But that woman's brokenness had become this woman's strength, her deepest wounds transformed into her greatest ministry. As I reached for the door handle, I whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for the pain I'd endured, but for the person it had helped me become. Someone who knew that forgiveness wasn't a feeling you waited for, but a freedom you fought for, day by day, choice by choice, until it became as natural as breathing. Inside, 12 women waited with their stories of betrayal, abandonment, and loss, each one hoping for something they couldn't name but desperately needed. I knew exactly what that was: permission to heal at their own pace, tools that actually worked, and the revolutionary understanding that forgiveness was not a gift they gave to those who hurt them, it was a gift they gave to themselves. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the door, ready to help them discover what I'd learned in Dr. Watson's office, what researchers at Stanford and Harvard had proven, what my own journey had taught me. You can forgive what you can't forget. And in doing so, you don't just heal your past, you reclaim your future. The circle of chairs waited. The healing was about to begin.